All right. So thank you everyone for coming. We will just jump right in because we've got a bit to go through. And so welcome. We're going to be talking today about the federal stimulus bills and unemployment insurance, and just information that you might find useful currently or in the future. Before we get started, as I had mentioned, that the session is recorded and we'll be sharing it. So it's something that you can kind of go back to, or you can share with family or friends, anyone that you think might benefit from it. For right now, if you can please, it looks like you all did this already, so thank you for muting, just to reduce the background noise. You're welcome to have your video on if you want, but it's not necessary. And then during our presentations, if you have any clarifying questions, you can use the chat feature. I believe it should be at the bottom of the Zoom. And you can chat in there, and Melinda will let me know. But otherwise, if you have just sort of questions that kind of pop up, maybe jot them down or make a note of it, and then we'll have question and answer segments at the end of each segment. All right, so just kind of a quick overview of what we're going to be going through. So we're going to be talking about two federal acts that recently passed. The first one is the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, and the second is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act. I'm going to be talking about and presenting on the stimulus payments, paid and sick leave and paid family leave, and then a little bit of information about immediate assistance options if you need or know anyone that might need anything, and then we'll get to a Q&A. And then we'll move on to unemployment insurance, and Lindsay will be talking about that, talking about what it is, what you need in terms of the information, the documents, and so forth to apply, how to recertify. The new legislation, there's additional sort of payments that are tagged on for unemployment. There's also unemployment options potentially for people who are self-employed and gig workers, and then Q&A, and then sort of a general Q&A at the end, sort of thinking about next sessions and next steps. Okay, so there's been a lot of sort of news, particularly for me. These are things that I sort of follow a lot about this, the stimulus checks. I think a better way to talk about them is as rebates, and I'll sort of share information why we should think about them that way. But if you don't already know, so the amounts for the rebates, it's $1,200 for individuals. So if you file as a single person or a head of household, this would be the amount. If you file married filing jointly, $2,400. And then for each child that you typically claim on your tax return as a dependent child who is under the age of 17, there's an additional $500 that's tagged on, and that's for each child. So if you have 3 children, that'll be $1,500 added on top of whichever, if you're sort of a single filer or a married filing jointly. In terms of the income eligibility, you'll receive the full amount if you make these amounts or under them. So if you're a single person and you file as a single person and you make $75,000 or less, you get the $1,200. Head of household, typically this is sort of a single person who either has dependents. That could be either child dependents or other type of dependents. You have a higher threshold for eligibility. And then for married filing jointly, sort of a double of the single. So 150,000. So it's not just a quick cutoff. Like if you get, if you make sort of $75,000 and $1, you're not then ineligible for the credit. But what happens is that the amount reduces by $5 for each additional $500 that you earn above that, right? So think about that if you earn $75,100, then your credit would be $5 less. And I have a slide where there's a website you can go to if you want to figure out how much exactly that you should be receiving, or want to sort of check if you have received something, if you got what you should have. A couple other eligibility concerns. To receive the rebate, you must not be claimed as a dependent by someone else. So there's been conversations for like college students who are claimed by their parents. They would not receive a rebate based on this law. So I give the example of like a 20-year-old claimed by their parent. Also, if someone is sort of an older person and maybe they receive Social Security, but they're claimed by a family member, they also wouldn't receive it. So if you are claimed or someone is claimed as a dependent on someone else's taxes, then they don't receive it. And then lastly, to receive it, you have to have a Social Security number. So unfortunately, there was a lot of pushback on this, particularly for folks who are undocumented, but currently the law only for those who have a Social Security number. And unfortunately also it's everyone on a tax return. So say if, two people on it are, have Social Security numbers, but there's an additional person that doesn't, unfortunately it seems at this time that the whole family wouldn't get it. And there's advocacy around that to sort of change that. So this just kind of really breaks it down in a picture to sort of have a better understanding, right? So if you're individual, you get that $1,200 plus the $500 for the child, and so forth. This is a website that you can go to. We'll share the slides afterwards, and we can share that. Also, I could share in the chat a little bit later, but it's a good, easy website that I found that you kind of just put in your information and you can find out how much you should receive. Okay, so how to get it. So the rebates are based on either your 2018 or 2019 tax return. So it's, if you filed your 2019 tax return in the past, at least within the past couple weeks, they'll be using that tax return to calculate the amount. And they'll also use that if you included direct deposit information on your tax return, that's where they will send the money. They'll send it to that account. If you haven't filed a 2019 return, then they'll be looking at your 2018 return. Now, I think what is happening actually is that if you haven't filed your 2019, they're not quite issuing those yet. Because there could be potentially that maybe you don't have that account anymore, right? So there will be a new site, actually it's the site that's down here below, that people will be able to go in there and to provide direct deposit information. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. If you are someone that hasn't filed for 2019 and you did in 2018, but your direct deposit information is, you'll definitely want to get on this site to put in your new information. For people who receive Social Security or SSDI, the rebate will be delivered through their monthly payment. So either if you receive a check or a direct deposit, it's supposed to be sort of tacked on to that. One sort of caveat to that is that the IRS doesn't know if you are, if you're someone who receives Social Security, but you have a child dependent, they don't know that, right? So if that is the case, then you'll actually need to notify the IRS. And this is, again, the same website that there's a spot where they call it non-filers, where you can go and you can provide that information. And then lastly, again, this website can be used for either perhaps you didn't need to file a tax return for some reason, or if you receive SSI, so another form of disability insurance, and you don't receive Social Security or SSDI, then again, you can go to this website, the IRS website, and there's a place where it says for non-filers where you can go to provide some information there to be able to get the payment. 1 second. Okay. Sorry, my computer is going slow now. All right. Big question is, do I have to pay this back? No, you don't. So this is a new advanced refundable tax credit that's going to be based on your 2020 income. Okay, so they're using your 2018 or 2019 income to estimate how much you should receive. However, if in the end, next year you end up earning more and you would potentially have to receive less of the credit, you don't have to pay that back. So whatever you get is what you're going to get, right? So you don't have to worry about, oh, am I actually going to have to give some of this back? On the flip side, actually, let's say if you earned more this year, more last year, and then this year you earned less and you could be eligible for more, when you file your taxes next year, you actually get the remaining amount for that. Because again, this is sort of an advance credit on what the IRS thinks that you'll earn in 2020. Is this taxable? No, it's not taxable. Just like other tax credits, sort of like the child tax credit, that's one way that I think about it. It's not considered taxable. So this also means that for anyone, if you receive Medicaid, SNAP, if you have get housing assistance, anything like that, it doesn't count towards eligibility for anything like that. Will this reduce my tax refund for next year? So again, because a lot people use the words advance refund, advance. People have been, oh, well, then that means I'm going to get less next year. No, again, this is a new credit, a very new credit just for this year. And one way that I think about it, like I said earlier, is that it's a rebate, right? So when you go to the store, you buy something, you get a rebate, you mail that in, you get that money back, right? So it's a one-time rebate. It's not something that you have to pay back, and it's not going to reduce your refund for next year. Some people ask, I typically don't get a tax refund because I have some sort of debt that the government typically takes my refund. Can I still get it? So for many people, you can still actually receive this rebate, and you should get it. So the rebate cannot be intercepted. That's language that the IRS uses, but essentially the rebate cannot be taken away if you owe past due taxes, student loans, unemployment insurance, overpayments. However, for child support, it can be intercepted. So for individuals who are owing child support, the credit can be reduced and taken for that. And then lastly, I believe tax day is tomorrow, right? But if you haven't filed your taxes, the good news is that you don't have to until July 15th. So the filing date has been pushed back, as well as the date to pay taxes. So if you're someone that typically come tax time you have to pay, you have a little bit more time to be able to do that. Okay, so I'm going to move forward to emergency paid sick leave and paid family leave. So this was part of both the bills and sort of responding to that, people might be getting sick. They might have to be taking care of family members during this time. So this is a new program that has been implemented at the federal level and hopefully will be implemented at employers. But there are only certain people who are covered. So in the legislation, it's only for workers who work for an employer that has fewer than 500 employees. employees that work in state and local government agencies of all sizes. So it's not, it doesn't matter how many employees, and then most federal employees. And then also self-employed workers and independent contractors can claim a tax credit for the time that they were unable to work. So if you are self-employed, this will be something to sort of look into. If you need to take time off because you're sick or you have a family member sick or anything like that. However, there in the legislation, it does allow the Department of Labor, that's the DOL, they do have discretion to exempt some businesses. So businesses that have fewer than 50 employees, certain healthcare providers, and a few other caveats. So if you are covered, your rights as an employee, your employer cannot require you to look for or find a replacement to cover the hours that you are then not going to be able to work. If you are receiving healthcare coverage through your employer must continue to provide your healthcare coverage. This is under the FMLA, so the Family Medical Leave Act. So it's supposed to protect your job as well. So if you take leave, you should be able to return to your job and have your same job. But again, this is only in response to COVID. So paid leave is currently in this law is only available to the end of this year. So to give you a little bit of information in terms of emergency, so there's two programs, right? So there's the paid sick leave, which is sort of a short-term program, and then there's paid family leave, which is a longer-term program. So for paid sick leave, when can you use it? So if you're using it to care for yourself, this is what sort of the guidance that is offered. So if you are subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order, so essentially if the city of Chicago, says that for whatever reason you need to quarantine yourself, you could potentially use your sick leave for that. If you've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, so you've talked to your doctor, and your doctor says, based on the symptoms that you have or based on the people that you've been with, you need to self-quarantine. Or if you're starting to experience what you think are symptoms and you're seeking a medical diagnosis. So in this case, obviously, you can't be seeking a medical diagnosis for 2 weeks. You have to be actively doing something in that. So this is kind of a murky place, but obviously if you sort of, one day you're like, okay, I'm feeling sick, you notify your employer, and then you're seeking a medical diagnosis, this should be potentially something that could be covered. Within the sick leave as well, there are provisions that if you're caring for someone else, so if you are caring for an individual who is essentially all the same provisions, right? So someone who is subject to a quarantine or isolation, if you're caring for someone that's for the same reasons under the state, federal, or local, or also to care for a child in school or in place of care, or if the place of care is closed. So unfortunately, for the caring for others, the pay rate is reduced. So the pay rate is 2/3 of your normal pay, and I actually have another slide that kind of goes through how much and so forth. Lastly, sort of a carve out and sort of an exemption or exception are those if the employee must be able to work or telework to take leave under this law. So essentially, like if you're able to telework, you can't take advantage of it. I don't agree with that, but this is essentially how the law is written. It doesn't make sense to me. If you're sick, how are you supposed to work, even if you telework? But just something to kind of keep in mind if you try to take advantage of it and your employer's like, well, no, you can telework. There is sort of this exception. All right. So how much? So if you're a full-time employee, this is supposed to provide 2 weeks of, so two 40-hour weeks, 10 days of paid work. If you're a part-time employee, up to the number of hours that you would work on average over a 2-week period. So if on average you work 20 hours, for each week that it would be for 20 hours. How much do you get paid? So as I was sort of alluding to previously, if you're taking care of yourself, so if it's like for your own quarantine or your own, you're sick or so forth, it's your regular pay, rate of pay up to $511 per day. And if your regular pay is below minimum wage, at least the minimum wage. So in terms of this is typically for folks who are tipped employees. So tipped employees typically get paid under the minimum wage because tips are supposed to bring them up to the minimum wage, but you just get sort of the minimum wage for that. If you're using paid sick time to take care of someone else, then as I had alluded to before, that it's paid at 2/3 of your regular rate, up to $200 a day. And the same thing for minimum wage employees. So I sort of came up with this example to kind of make it hopefully a little bit clearer. So say if I have an hourly rate of $18 an hour and I typically work 8 hours a day and I take off 7 days. If I'm caring for myself, my daily pay would be $144, and for 7 days that would be $1,008. And then if I'm doing the same 7 days, but actually I'm caring for someone else, it's going to be 2/3 of that 144, or about $96. And for 7 days, that would be $672. Okay. So as I was saying, sick time or sick leave is for short term. Paid family leave is a more longer term program to be able to take advantage of. So for this, what it can be used for is to care for a child whose school or place of care is closed. Also including if their child care provider is unavailable, and I'll provide a little bit more information what that means. So there's been questions in terms of the type of care closures that are covered. So this kind of reviews, so licensed childcare centers, group home childcare providers, family childcare providers, or provider who is paid for providing childcare services on a regular basis. So if you normally receive childcare from one of these providers and there's no and is no longer able to be to provide you with care, you may be eligible to take the emergency paid leave. If normally you receive some form of unpaid childcare, maybe a relative or unlicensed provider is typically watches your children, currently it seems like that it's not covered. Obviously, it's sort of the same situation, right? You're having to take care of your kids, and it sort of gets in the way of work. But it seems currently that the rules are being interpreted that it wouldn't be able to cover that. And again, like I had mentioned before, for sick leave, that you must be unable to work or telework to be able to take advantage of this. All right. So how much can you use? So if you're a full-time employee or part-time, it's up to 12 weeks. If you're a full-time employee, paid as if they worked 40 hours a week per week. However, the first 2 weeks, 10 days can be unpaid. And I'll get to sort of a way you can actually get paid for those first two weeks. For paid employees, up to 12 weeks again, and again, sort of like sick time, paid as if they work the number of hours they normally get scheduled. So if you normally work 20 hours, then for each week, sort of getting paid for those 20 hours. So how much do I get paid when I use? So as I said, the first 10 days can be unpaid. So it's interesting, it says can, so that means the employer can sort of have wiggle room in this. But some are interpreting the law that you would be able to sort of what a lot of people already do in the workplace is sort of combining different types of leave and sick days. You may be able to use your emergency paid sick days for the first 10 days because that would be sort of something that is covered under the sick leave. The emergency paid family leave is paid at a rate of 2/3 of your regular pay rate. And the employer is not required to pay more than $200 per day or a total of $10,000 in total. So again, as an example, for the same person, right? So you get $18 per hour, typically work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. I need to take off 2 months. So my daily rate would be 2/3 of 144, right? My typical pay, or $96. And I sort of go through what you would expect to get weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly. And then lastly, before we get into talking about unemployment insurance, I wanted to share a little bit about other sort of options before if you're going to be seeking unemployment insurance, sort of noting that that might take time. If you have been laid off or you lose your job, if you go for unemployment, unfortunately, unemployment doesn't offer health coverage. So you might think about applying for SNAP and Medicaid before you apply for unemployment insurance. I've spoken with someone who works for the state, and sort of this person's recommendation to sort of get your application through and as quickly as possible is to, on your application, to report that you have zero income. Because essentially in a couple of weeks, that would be the case, right? Again, I'm sort of addressing, folks that just sort of, lost their job or laid off or whatever, because this will expedite your application. What will happen then is that the Illinois case manager will call and, you'll have to provide more information. It's important to provide factual information based on that. So in that, you can share when you expect your last paycheck, how much that will be. Thinking about, if this is something that happens mid-month, being sure that you share that information, how much you've received so far. And then how that will happen is to sort of think about, okay, based on this month, are you eligible? Maybe, maybe not. But then going forward, we're assuming that you have no income, so you would be eligible. There'll be other things, and sort of thinking about, sharing information about updates in terms of, if you get the unemployment, sharing those updates. If this is a topic that folks are interested in finding more about, particularly for folks that maybe have a family, they have children, they're really concerned about healthcare coverage, we might be able to cover that topic more in detail. But I kind of just wanted to put this out there. This is the website to apply. And then if you need sort of assistance with applying, these are two resources potentially. So Michelle is a social worker that I've been in contact with, that she's able to help folks over the phone in applying. And then there's just sort of the general Illinois Hunger Coalition that has a phone number as well that can sort of help folks through that process as well. This was sort of very, very quick. There's a lot of things and sort of caveats, but if there is interest, we can definitely, sort of go in more detail into that. So that is all. We can move to the question answer. I know I went pretty quickly, so there might be some questions. No questions. I answered all your questions. You can come off, so sorry, I should have said how we can ask questions, right? So you're welcome to type them into the chat box, or you're welcome to unmute yourself, and you can ask your question that way.
We do have a question in the chat box, and it is, what's the reasoning behind doing it before applying for unemployment insurance?
Yeah, sure. Oops. So, sorry, this was the, oh, okay. Yeah, so So two things, and Lindsay will get into this. There's a backlog for unemployment. We really don't know how quickly people will be able to get it. So if you're concerned about, your ability to be able to purchase groceries and things like that, so that's just kind of one thing to think about, that if you are in this position where you're going to be applying for unemployment, there are a lot of people applying, and there could be sort of a wait time until you start receiving the benefits. We really don't have a sense of like how quickly those benefits will be going out. The second is that I was talking with my friend who works at the state, and he's really concerned because obviously with unemployment you don't get healthcare coverage. So what he was sort of saying is that, look, like, have people apply, and then they could potentially get the SNAP, get the Medicaid. So now they have health insurance, and then once they get the unemployment, call the state or just go in online. You can sort of update your case here, I believe, and say that you don't want SNAP anymore. The reason why is because with SNAP, they do more sort of check-ins in terms of recertifications. And with Medicaid, they don't do that as much. They really don't look into, like, if you have new income or anything like that. I can go into more detail, but essentially, like, the reason is that if you want to make sure you have healthcare coverage, this is sort of like the only thing that we have at the moment, other than if you want to pay for it out of pocket. And that can be very expensive. So again, if there is a lot of interest in that, we can sort of go into more detail. But I don't, there's just a lot there. And there's a lot of sort of caveats and different things that can get kind of complicated. But that's sort of like a quick summary.
I'll just add that COBRA could also be an option.
Yeah.
If that's something that you wish to pay for. That can be quite expensive, but you can go back 60 days or 60 days out from the time when you lose your insurance is the length of time that you can apply for COBRA. So it isn't something that you need to do immediately in the instance of losing a job. So just keep that in mind as well. And we do have another question, which is, as long as someone has a social security number and is not claimed by anyone else, they should be able to get a stimulus check, correct?
Yes. So it really depends on the situation. Let me see if I have it down here. It really depends on the situation that someone is in. So if you file a tax return, you should be able to get it fairly quickly. So if you are someone that actually, when it comes to tax time, you pay taxes, you probably won't get a direct deposit. In a couple of days, that website that I had on here, there'll be a portal where you can share your direct deposit information. But those checks are starting to go out this week. So if you are someone that included your direct deposit information, then you should be expecting that soon. So if you don't, then that might be something that you'll want to go into this website and sort of see, okay, maybe I can just, provide my information there. Any other questions? No?
I have a quick question, Dylan. Can you share, this is Stephanie, can you share back with us, with those of us who are on the call?
Uh-huh.
Just so we can go back and refer to the information in it.
Oh, you said, sorry, you clicked that. Did you say share the slides?
Yes, the slides.
Okay, yeah, no, definitely.
The deck, yeah, the slides.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, we say deck at work, so sorry about that.
Anything else? All right, well, if anything else comes up, we'll have an option at the end for more questions. All right, so I am going to stop my share.
Time for unemployment insurance to shine.
Yes.
Okay, let me get this started. Sorry, y'all. Okay, can everybody see my screen? We're good?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay. I am an administrative attorney with NSN Employer Services, which just means that I handle unemployment matters for employers. I'm not on the claimant side, but I have learned quite a bit about unemployment law over the last year or so, helping different companies navigate the situation. So as you can imagine, I'm a little bit sleep deprived currently, but I am sorry to anybody who is experiencing job loss right now. That is heartbreaking, and I'm sorry that that's been your experience, but hopefully this information that I'm going to provide for you can be helpful. So we're going to get started. So what is unemployment insurance? It's a program that provides money to those who are out of work. So you are eligible for unemployment if you quit with good cause, were fired without good cause, you were laid off through no fault of your own, or you had your hours reduced. So when I say quit with good cause, let's say that you are just in general outside of COVID, you're having an issue at work and your boss is not listening to you, you filed a formal complaint with HR, you're still being harassed, or you're still having a difficult time working with somebody, or they were not providing a safe work condition for you, and you decided to quit after your employer made no effort to remedy the situation, you at that point could be eligible for unemployment. If you were fired without good cause or for a reason that is considered not significant to the state, for poor performance, or they just didn't want to work with you anymore, something like that, something that's through no fault of your own, then you could be eligible for unemployment. For today's purposes, if you're laid off through no fault of your own, so you can no longer go into work because your office does not allow you to do so due to COVID-19, and you have no work from home option, or they are ceasing operations for the time being, you are considered laid off or furloughed, and therefore you would be eligible potentially for unemployment. And then lastly, if your hours are reduced, meaning like if you were previously working 40 hours a week and you were reduced down to 20, it's possible that you could be eligible for unemployment if your hours have been reduced. The reason why I'm saying possibly is because, as you can imagine, unemployment law has kind of taken on its own life in the last couple of weeks. I joked with a friend about actually a month ago, I said to my sister, oh, wow, I'm a subject matter expert on unemployment law. And then they rolled out like 5 new laws in a week. And I was like, okay, back at square one. So right now, these are the reasons that you would most likely be eligible for unemployment. So how did COVID change unemployment insurance? What it did was it added an additional $600 to each weekly payment beginning immediately through July 31st. Oh, I put 2021. That should be 2020. Don't get it twisted. Only 4 months. Sorry for that typo. Just through July 31st. So whether or not you are eligible for $1 of unemployment or the full maximum amount, that you would be eligible for that additional $600 weekly up until July 31st of 2020. Sorry, that's a big typo. 2020, not 2021. Unemployment insurance will also be extended for some people from 26 weeks to 39 weeks, so an additional 13 weeks, an additional right around like 3 months for those that might need it. And then additionally, self-employed individuals can apply starting soon, and we will touch on that in a little bit. So how to apply. You can apply online at ides.gov or over the phone. If you have already tried to apply, I know what you're thinking. Lindsay, I cannot get in. I have not heard back from anyone. The website keeps crashing. They are experiencing an extremely high volume of calls and messages right now. So try to be patient and try to follow the instructions that they've given. So for last names A through M, you can apply online on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Try your best to stick to your day if you can. They did put a caveat in there that Fridays are kind of a catch-all day. You can call the number I've provided here during these hours. I would recommend calling right at 7:30 in the morning if you can get up that early, just because the rest of the day they are completely slammed. I've heard from multiple judges telling me that they are at capacity and they are like the mailroom is in shambles. Everything over there is, we need to pray for IDES. Is what I'm saying. We need to pray for IDES. And then for the last names N through Z, you can apply online Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then you can call the same number as well for those dates. So what do you need to apply? You need to have a social security number, a driver's license or state ID. You need to have your name, your mailing address, a phone number, and make sure that it's a mailing address of a mailbox that you check. So this is something, just a side bar, that happens all the time in unemployment matters. We get to an unemployment hearing where somebody's saying they deserve benefits and they're saying, I never got this, I never got that, I didn't get a chance to appeal. And it's because they gave a mailing address that they are no longer present for. They forgot to update the state on their mailing address. Of all the things, I'm like, please make sure your mailing address is correct. They will be communicating through the mail to you, and you want to make sure that you can receive everything that they are sending your way, because it is extremely important. You need to have your employment dates, your first date worked and your last date worked. You're also going to want to include information like your job title, your rate of pay, and why you were separated. Those are the standard questions that you will be asked. Your first name, last name, job title, rate of pay, reason for separation. And you also want to include your wage records, because that's how they will calculate how much your weekly benefit amount will be. So maybe you are not from the US, can you still apply? Yes, if you have a green card, you're a DACA recipient, or any of these other things that I've listed here. Those are the different people that can apply for unemployment. How much money will you get? Well, it depends. So the state will take all of your wages. This is a very complicated formula. I don't recommend, if you're not a math person, diving into this, but the state's going to take all of your wages from the last 18 months. So just another sidebar, what happens when you file for unemployment is everybody that you've worked for the last 18 months is going to get notified by the state. And I say that because a lot of people don't realize that, and then they're upset and they're like, well, I didn't want to collect unemployment from that employer, I wanted it from this employer. It doesn't work like that. The state will take all of these wages from the last 18 months and determine which employer was your last chargeable employer. And at that point, they will be determining who is your last chargeable employer, and how we can, oops, sorry, y'all. I was seeing the chat and I was like, am I silent? Can you hear me? Okay. Who is your last chargeable employer and how much you earned during that, what's called your base period, that 18-month period. And then they'll take the 2 quarters with the highest wages, add them together, multiply it by 0.47, and then divide by 26 weeks. And that will be your weekly benefit amount. So in Illinois, the maximum amount you can collect with no dependents would be $484. And this is before your additional $600 now. With a dependent spouse, $577, and with a dependent child or multiple children, $669. And that's your maximum amount. So some people can collect only $30. Some people can collect $200. It will completely vary. But just remember that no matter how much you are collecting, you will still get that $600 extra each week until July 31st of 2020, not 2021. Okay. Will your claim get approved? Most likely, yes. If you were laid off due to COVID-19, please, 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 like the most important thing you can do on your application is say, I was laid off due to the coronavirus or COVID-19 or because of a disaster-related separation. You want to make that abundantly clear to the state. If your job has provided you with any type of documentation saying that you were laid off, that you will no longer be earning wages, supply that to the state. Give them as much information as you can so that they can make a decision faster. Because what they're going to do when they get your claim is they're also going to contact your employer, and then your employer has to respond, and they have to decide whether or not you get it and how much you get it, and then issue that back out to you. So make it as easy on the state as possible by making it very plain why you were laid off or what happened with your separation. If your doctor tells you that you cannot go to work because you have a higher risk or you actually have COVID, that is a good reason, and the state would consider that as something that could make you eligible for unemployment. They are expanding it. Typically, having to take care of a child is not considered something that would be make you eligible for unemployment, but recently they're expanding it, saying that in this situation, because everybody's kids are out of school, they're being a little bit more flexible. And your employer reduced your work hours. So as I was saying before, if you used to work 30 hours, now you can only work 15 or 40 down to 20. Go ahead and apply. That's kind of like the position I'm holding right now. If you're on Lindsay, I'm just not sure, I would recommend going ahead and applying, because it's better to let the state decide than you decide for yourself and end up being wrong and not receiving the money that you might really need. So a couple of things I wanted to add also about what's considered disqualifying income. Disqualifying income is income that the state factors in to determine how much you're eligible for. So for example, if you are laid off starting this past Monday, but your job paid out your vacation pay for the next week, that would delay your unemployment benefits for the next week. So they're going to use the vacation pay that you provided and add it to another little fancy formula that some math whiz came up with to determine how much of that vacation pay, based on your hourly wages, and then delay your unemployment. So workers' compensation payments, wages, vacation pay, FMLA can be considered disqualifying income. So I would recommend you go ahead and apply, or when you apply, to provide all that information to the state so that you get the delay over with and they can move on and start getting you benefits. But those things are considered disqualifying income. So if severance is not, but if you are thinking about applying and your job is offering you, like, we'll pay you out for the next month, and you might not be eligible for benefits for the next month, but you would be getting a paycheck is essentially what the state's going to look at. Like, if you are receiving income through one of these ways, and we don't need to pay you unemployment, we'll start paying you unemployment after the fact. So what happens if you get denied? Appeal it. So you are going to get what's called a determination in the mail, which is why I was harping on making sure that you have a good, solid address where you can get mail, and make sure that you read it thoroughly. So you will get a determination that tells you whether you are approved for benefits or denied. If you are denied, then what you're going to want to do is read the reason as to why. If you get a denial, you can also send it to me and I'll help you read it. It will say something like, you have been denied because your employer contested your claim. Most employers are not contesting them at this point because they're all layoffs. But if something like that happens, read your determination, figure out why the state's denying you benefits. Maybe you're missing some type of information. Maybe they misunderstood something you reported, or your employer reported something incorrectly, which does happen. You just want to follow the appeal instructions, and you want to appeal it at that point. And just a tidbit, you want to appeal it based on the mail date. So a lot of times people think it's 30 days from the day they received it. That is wrong. You will be late and they might not reopen your case. You need to appeal based on the mail date, the date that the IDES mailed it out to you. A failure to provide wage information is sometimes a reason that I see come across. Like, they can't grant you benefits if they don't know how much they should give you. So just make sure to read all the mail you get from IDES. And if you're having trouble with that, you can reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help. I'm an independent contractor. What do I do? So federal law has passed saying that independent contractors, people that are self-employed, that work for themselves, gig economy workers, are able to apply for benefits. I checked the IDES website yesterday. They specifically said, wait. If you apply right now, you will get denied because they have not figured out how to do that. Essentially, what's happening is people that are employed through a business, their employers have been paying into this unemployment fund for years. They have a tax rate, or they pay dollar for dollar. So now we've got people that haven't been paying into that because they've been working for themselves and they don't have employees. So the state's thinking, like, where are we going to get the money for that, right? So that's what they're trying to figure out, and trying to figure out how much should they be paying those people that fall into these specific categories. How are they going to track how much they should be paying them, and things of that nature. So they're still working out the details, but I would recommend following up with the IDES website if you have additional questions on that, or just to check for updates. How long is it going to take me? I hate this question. I've been getting this question so much, but there is no answer. I looked today, and some of the claims that we processed on our end, so let's say the claim date was 3/15, we got it back to the state on 3/25. We got determinations in today. So I'm not good at math, but that's like, what, three weeks? So it could take 2 to 4 weeks. They are extremely backed up. So try to be patient, but there's, I think I have a slide about this as well. There's really no workaround to it. So there's no back end way to call somebody. If you can't get through on the website and you can't get through on the phone, the best advice I have for you is to keep trying. I can't even get in touch with anybody unless they call me directly, and they can't speak to me about claims that are not currently on their dockets. So that's my advice on that. Oh, there's my slide. So like I was saying, there's no workaround. You just have to keep being persistent. If you're trying online, this sounds so bad, but try at like 3 a.m. when nobody else is trying. Like, I'm imagining that between 9 to 5, people are like waking up determined to get their things done for the day. So they're like, unemployment's on their list, workers' comp, all this stuff is on their list. So try to apply during an off hour when nobody is on the internet whatsoever. So that's what you can do. And then just making sure that you have your questions and as much information as you can ready. just because they are completely swamped, and they're going to try to probably move you along pretty quickly. Okay, you're getting benefits. Congratulations. Now what? You need to make sure that you continue to certify. Certification means they're going to give you a specific date that you need to do so on. Bi-weekly, you need to go on the website or call in and just essentially confirm that all of the information you provided them at your original claim is the same. So basically you would stop certifying for benefits if you got a job, or if you were hired, or something, maybe you were, your hours were reduced, right? And then all of a sudden you got completely laid off, so you have no hours. The recertification would be a great time to let the state notify that your situation has changed and how it's changed. You need to make sure that you follow through with recertifying, because if you fail to do so, state is not going to be happy, and it could stop you from receiving your benefits. So you can do that online, or you can do that over the phone. I was doing this, so tired. Sorry for all the typos. Okay, my job opened back up. Do I have to go? Yes. So unless you have a reasonable excuse for not returning to work, like you are completely sick, you have received or accepted a better job offer, or they offered you a job that's not suitable. So for example, let's say you were working in a factory making $15 an hour packing, and your employer came back and said, we would like for you to do administrative work for $12 an hour, 40 miles farther than what we normally would have you travel. You do not have to accept that job. The state is not going to consider that what's called a reasonable job offer. So I'm telling you this because from the employer side, I know how employers are going to respond to this, because they've been calling me all week asking me, what do we do if somebody wants to stay on unemployment? They're getting an extra $600. I told them most likely people aren't going to want to do that. But the fact of the matter is they can submit what's called a refusal of work form. And on that refusal of work, they have to prove that they offered you either your exact same job back, or a reasonable a job that's reasonably like comparable. Like it's basically the same job, same pay, same distance, all that stuff. But if you have a good reason for not going back to work, notify the state of that. But unless it falls within one of these categories, they're going to stop your unemployment and require you to go back to work. I also want to add, I'm trying not to like inundate you all with like unemployment, but there previously was a requirement called an able and available and actively seeking work requirement, which means that you have to prove that you've been working or looking for work if you're off of work, meaning signing up for the job search engine on the IDES website. You have to keep a work search record. A lot of that stuff is not required right now, because where are you going to get a job, right? Everything's closed. So the state was smart enough to figure out, like, we can't ask all these people to look for work in order to get benefits because everything's closed. So my only caution with that is the second things start opening back up, you want to be ahead of the state on that. I would recommend already having, like, if you hear like Governor Pritzker says May 15th we're open, that week before May 15th, I would say start looking for work. So you can have something to prove to the state that you still deserve benefits if you haven't, or I shouldn't say deserve, you still are eligible for benefits if you haven't found a job yet, and you can prove to them that you have done your due diligence to comply with the law. I was on unemployment before COVID, what do I do? So essentially what you can do is, if you've exhausted your benefits, you still might be eligible for the additional weeks. I would continue to certify and check the IDES websites to see if they provide any additional information or links or whatever to help you navigate that. But the person you're in contact with at IDES might be able to assist you with that. And then just to clarify, the $600, as far as I know, as of right now, is not going to be backdated before 3/29/2020. So if you were on benefits March 15th, no $600 extra dollars. But if you were on March 29th, yes. And even if you, let's say you didn't get on benefits until this week, you will get your $600 for those previous weeks, as long as you were laid off for those previous weeks. Maybe you just weren't able to get your benefits yet until this week. So those will be backdated. And I think that's it. These are the resources I use. I know I went super fast. I get a little nervous sometimes when I talk fast, but I'm happy to go back over anything if it didn't make sense. I think that the number one question I've gotten right now is, what do? I can't get in. And I hate that my answer is keep trying, but that's the best answer I've got right now. The state is working diligently and as quickly as possible to get everybody everything that they need in time. But these two links, and I'll send out my slides as well, will be pretty helpful for you, pretty clear-cut FAQ to assist anybody. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help. Does anybody have any questions? I closed the chat. How do I bring the chat back?
You can click on the chat on the very bottom. There is actually a question for Dylan, and I'll read it out. And
I see it, Melinda.
Right, but for the recording.
Oh yeah.
So that folks know what's being asked. So it's, how are small businesses paying for the emergency sick and family leave? If an employer is losing revenue and not able to pay the sick family leave, is there another guarantee, i.e. does the fed or state government pay? What should someone do if their employer is not complying with the sick family leave pay?
Yeah, so one thing that everyone may have gathered from listening to both presentations is that a lot of that is covered for paid sick leave and family leave. Some of it is covered under unemployment, right? So if you've had to leave your job because of COVID, right? And so it's kind of an interesting situation where I've heard that some employers are actually just kind of saying, okay, well, it actually makes better sense for you to go on to unemployment because you'll be getting more money. And so, yeah, so that's kind of like one thing to kind of keep in mind, that there could be a potential situation where at sort of a employer level that someone is being sort of, I don't know what the word would be, but maybe not pressured, but encouraged to go on to unemployment instead of stay employed. So in terms of the paying, that's definitely a big concern. And I think that I've read a lot actually, because this was supposed to start on April 1st, and employers are just like, how do we comply with this within, days? There are tax credits that employers are eligible for. So employers can claim a tax credit for up to 100% of the wages that are paid through the emergency sick time and for the paid family leave time. So there is something that is available to employers. Also, they're able to sort of speed up the reimbursement process. Employers are able to choose to keep some of the quarterly payroll tax payments that they would normally make. But I think the sort of important aspect of what the question was is that some employers might be having no revenue, right? So they might not even have the money to pay people. So I do feel that, there could be a lot of sort of issues happening on the ground. And this is really sort of what I would term an implementation issue of kind of, trying to roll out this huge policy, paid family leave policy nationally within days. I think that there are some employers that are really going to try hard and are going to try to do this because they want to keep their people on the payroll. As I was referencing earlier, unemployment is a great resource, and we have that additional $600, but you don't get, the healthcare coverage with that and other benefits that you might have through your employer. So this was sort of one aspect of the legislation to, provide something to employers to be able to keep their employees. But definitely, I do feel like there can be issues. And I don't know if, Lindsay, if you have any comments in terms of like more of the sort of aspect of, what should someone do if their employer is not complying with the policy? I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Well, my brain immediately goes, hire a lawyer, but I know that might not be feasible right now. That's a good question. I'd have to think on that one. My number one, though, I know this sounds kind of broad, is to document everything. Like if you can avoid doing things over the phone and get all the email chains, just in case, you know what I mean? I know that's the lawyer in me talking, but like the more documentation you have, the better, just in case you do need to defend something or actually do hire a lawyer at some point if they're not compliant with the law. So that's that's my best advice. I would document everything, do as much over email. Even if you talk on the phone, send a recap email saying, just to recap our conversation, you notified me that you would be unable to comply with such and such and such on this date at this time. And it's gonna get awkward, because most of these people probably don't mean you any harm, but if they're not compliant and it's harming you, then you do need to kind of do what you need to do to protect yourself.
Yeah. And also there was a whole other aspect of the legislation that provided loans and grants to small businesses, but it seemed that the funding for that wasn't as expansive as what people were expecting, and the eligibility that people were expecting as well. So there's a lot of issues in terms of what businesses are able to do. And really for here is to kind of share the information that, we obviously don't know how long this is going to be going on. Next month, maybe employers are going to be in a better position to be able to comply with some of these aspects. And it becomes, for example, if more businesses start going back, but schools are still canceled, these might be policies that people can take advantage of, right? That, okay, well, I can, people are able to go back to work more, but the school's already made the decision that they're going to stay, doing the online education through the end of the year, right? And so some of this might take time, but I definitely agree. Document as much as you can, and it's just to ask, and just and also I think one thing that you said, Lindsay, reminded me is that make sure that you specify that it is because I have been asked by a doctor to self-quarantine because of COVID, right? Unfortunately, you might have to reveal, you don't have to reveal that it's you, right? Because within it, it's just been, you've been asked to quarantine because of COVID. That doesn't mean that it's you have it. It could mean that, you've been exposed to somebody, etc. But yeah, so.
Yeah, and by document, have the doctor's note, have the date that they stated. A lot of times I feel like there's it's almost like playing telephone from the doctor to the employer. You know what I mean? The doctor doesn't always communicate exactly what the employer needs to see, or even the state needs to see on their notice. So make sure you communicate with your doctor and say, I need you to explicitly state what you're telling me over here. I need you to put it on paper and make it abundantly clear, because the more documentation you have, the better. And I don't think a lot of employers are going to be contesting at this point. The only ones we're contesting are just the ones where someone's still earning wages, because we're required to report those wages. So we would be contesting it whether or not we wanted to. But just having all the documentation you can is honestly the most important thing, I think, to moving things along a little bit faster for you. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. So if someone needs to prove that they are looking for work, what exactly does that mean?
Sure. So, yes, that's a great question. From what I've seen, because again, I'm not on the claimant side, so I don't have all the nitty-gritty details on it. But when I've been on a hearing where someone is essentially proving to us that they've been looking for work, they have what's called a work search record, and I think that's something that the state will talk to you about when the time comes to start checking again for being able and available when things start to open back up. But it would be where you applied or where you looked for work, what time you applied, what types of jobs you were looking for. So if if I have worked at a factory for the last 10 years and then I decide I'm going to apply to an IT department, the state's going to be like, is that a reasonable job for me? Or vice versa, right? If I worked at IT my entire life and now I'm going to go pack at the meat district, the state might not see that as a job that you should really be applying for, because what is the likelihood that you're going to get it, right? So for example, if I had to do a work search record, I should be looking at small to mid-sized firms. I should be looking at JD preferred jobs or legal jobs. If I all of a sudden start applying to be a doctor, the state's going to be like, Lynn, sis, no. So you want to have reasonable jobs on there, the dates and times that you reached out to someone and what happened with that job. Did you apply? Did they deny you? Did you have an interview? That type of thing. Does that help, Melinda?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And then one other question. So if you are working or if you were working for a small employer that did not pay into unemployment, are you now eligible to receive unemployment, or is that treated more like a gig or self-employed person?
That's a good question. I haven't had that question before, so I
Okay.
won't speak confidently on it, but I will
Mhm.
make an assumption that they would be treated like the gig economy worker or the independent contractor. That's what I would imagine.
Okay, so then the advice would be to wait until the
Mhm.
decides what they're doing with those
Yeah.
folks. Okay, great. I don't see any other questions come in, so I think we can wrap it up. So thank you so much to Dylan and Lindsay for sharing all this information, and both of them are available to answer any questions that you have. I don't know that I know everyone who is on the call right now, so if you do want the slides, if you could just email us and let us know that you want those, as we have some names popping up that I don't recognize and one that just says iPhone. So feel free to let us know if you'd like the information. I think with that, I think that's it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.